Welcome again to another episode of Leaders with Purpose. I'm Rebecca Hull, I'm Managing Director at Manifesto, and today we're joined by Dr. David Hunt, Director of Digital, Data and Technology at the Royal College of Anaesthetists.
I'm Lou Lai, co-host and Chief Client and Transformation Officer at Manifesto, and in today's episode we're going to really unpick digital transformation. What does it actually mean? We're going to look at the value of building the solid foundation so that any transformation you create actually has impact. And then we're also going to explore a squiggly career, so going from mathematics to digital data and technology.
Hi, David. It's, Dr. David Hunt. It's really great. I'm so happy that we've got you here today. You are the Director of Digital Data and Technology at the Royal College of Anaesthetists, and you're a trusted friend of Manifesto. And I know that you've got oodles and oodles of insight to share. So thank you for your time.
Brilliant. So, David, we met 4 years ago working on a large transformation program, which we will definitely dig into later in the episode. But for those who don't know your kind of story, it'd be great if you could just bring to life the journey that you've been on from, and I'm already giving a spoiler alert, from running a charity in China to the role that you have now.
I took a gap year before starting university, so I went to Canada and worked for Greenpeace, and that was my first charity job officially. I was a door-to-door fundraiser. And that then led to me starting university at University of Leicester, where I did maths, and had a really great set of lecturers. And after that, I did think, I better go and get a job and start contributing. So I moved back to London and got a job as an actuary or an actuarial assistant at the time. But it just wasn't for me, it just wasn't something that I was particularly keen on pursuing. And I didn't know what else to do. So I contacted my favourite lecturer, a guy called Professor Will Light, and said, can I come back and do a PhD? And he said, sure, which was amazing. So I went back to Leicester. But during that time, I was also obviously thinking about what I wanted to do after that. Do I stay in academia or do I do something different? And there wasn't a lot of process in this, but essentially I decided to move to China. So literally handed in my thesis, passed the Viva, and then moved to China in the February. And I thought I was going to be there for a year. I was there to get some non-profit experience and then use that and come back and start working in the charity sector. But things happened. I ended up staying in China for about 6.5 years. And one of the things I did there was I met a guy who had founded a small independent charity after the large earthquake in Sichuan in 2008. And that was working with rural communities. Initially, they were doing relief recovery, bringing supplies to villages that needed it. And then as that wound down, they were looking more at longer term development projects. And he offered me the chance to come and run that. But also, I was running the website and doing the social media and doing the marketing, which was where I found my real passion emerged from that. I then moved to Beijing and worked for an intergovernmental organization doing digital projects for them. And I built a tool that allowed them to track development sites across the globe. And those are things that I was quite interested in doing. And I thought, right, now I've got enough experience after 6.5 years. I moved back to the UK, and it took me a long time to find a job. I just couldn't really persuade anyone because I hadn't really applied for a charity job in the UK before that. What you need is someone who recognises that and that experience and looks at your whole kind of backstory and decides to take a chance on you. And I was really lucky that Will Howells at Leonard Cheshire interviewed me for a digital officer role and saw the right kind of experience that he needed. So that was my first full-time charity job, was Leonard Cheshire. And Will moved on not too long after that, and I moved up to become digital manager there. And from there, I then moved to breast cancer care to be head of digital. Breast cancer care then merged with breast cancer now, and through that process, I was appointed AD digital there and merged the digital teams. And that's where you and I then met for the first time.
Amazing. And appreciate the openness of your journey. And I think I guess that experience of maybe sort of being knocked back and not fitting the specific mold of recruitment, like how has that shaped your openness as a hiring manager, as a leader who can spot talent or spot experience and really see the potential in people?
Yeah, I think it shaped it in two ways. So I do look for more than just the most recent role, or look for certain qualifications. We've thankfully, I think, moved on from needing degree level education in the charity sector, which is a relief. So I do look for that, but also for unsuccessful candidates, I think it's so important to provide feedback. And I still remember the people that I asked for feedback who didn't provide me anything, who just didn't even respond to my requests. And I think that's something that is overlooked sometimes. If you're not willing to give feedback to someone, then it shows what you are as a hiring manager as well, and as a potential manager, a potential leader.
So let's dig into our time. So when we met, so it was 4 years ago, and you were leading a really large scale transformation program for the organisation, but also for the sector in terms of the scale of investment that you'd managed to secure. And maybe we can talk about that journey as well. It would be great to kind of, I guess, from your perspective as a sort of co-sponsor leader in that, multi-year program, what were the learnings that you took away from that, and how have you then sort of taken that into, your subsequent roles at, Royal Academy of Engineering and now at the Royal College of Anaesthetists?
So I think one of the important things at the time of the Breast Cancer Now work was just how positive and engaged the senior leadership team and the trustees were in investing in digital. It didn't take a lot of persuading. It was very much pushing an open door. So we're incredibly fortunate to have that as an opportunity. And they went with my proposal for when the two charities merged. I thought it would be too much to merge, learn how the organization is going to work, and undertake a full digital transformation at the same time. So we agreed that we would do a kind of two-phase approach where we'd merge the two website and digital kind of estates at a very superficial level, just essentially content import and reskinning, and not do the deep dive into what do we actually need to fundamentally shift in our digital approach. So that was the first phase. And then once that was bedded in and we were much more comfortable and had a vision for the merged organization, then we were able to write the kind of brief for what is the full vision. And that was really, again, pushing an open door to go in the direction of we need to just stop and fundamentally review everything and rebuild the foundations, because we would have been building on legacy systems, legacy databases, legacy digital platforms, websites, and ancillary sites as well. So again, I was really fortunate that they saw the value in that approach and gave us the green light to go ahead and pitch that kind of brief to agencies, and Manifesto was the one that ultimately we partner with.
I'd quite like to sort of double click on the highs and lows of digital transformation. And, I love how you say, well, we just imported some content and reskinned. Like, that's an easy thing to do, because anyone who's been involved in any kind of transformation project, let alone an integration of organisations, will know that in and of itself is a big piece of work. And, I'm really struck by the fact, and my own personal experience of years in delivery, is that so many transformation programs fail or only partially succeed, and and there are many reasons for that. I think before we get into what your kind of secret to success is in this space, when we talk about digital transformation, what does that mean to you? Because I think it's taken on a different meaning over time.
Yeah, in some sense, it's just become too much of a phrase to really mean anything. You've got to really, for each organization, really define what you mean by that, and it depends where you are in your maturity journey as well. But for me, it's about reviewing at a very basic level, what is it that we want to do that will ultimately serve our charitable purpose? What is it that we need to revisit and assess whether they are currently doing the job, or we need to completely replace those systems? And for me, it's about integrability. It's about not duplicating data and making sure that for the user experience, it is as seamless as possible, and they feel like a valued member of the charity. So for me, that's what I have been trying to achieve with I think every digital transformation I've been involved in.
And how do you manage the sort of the sense that perhaps people outside of the programme but who are significant stakeholders, I'm thinking sometimes board, trustees, volunteers, or is it done yet? When's it going to be finished? What are the sort of markers of progress that you look to communicate to those wider audiences?
I think it depends on the stakeholder, and for some the question is, okay, when are we going to launch the new website? And it has to be there have to be defined milestones along the way, and you have to be really open about the journey is longer than just press a button, a new website. And for breast cancer now, we took the strategic decision to do really phased launches of separate sections, so that we didn't have that kind of big bang moment of yesterday it was this, today it's a whole new experience, and we could learn as we go. And it was about communicating that approach to the SLT and to the trustees to make sure that they understood the value of doing that and why it was riskier to do these big bang moments. And they wouldn't necessarily be able to see the impact initially of some of the things we were doing, like making sure that the integrations with the database and CRM were robust. But those are valuable foundational steps that you need to undertake before you can do the more visual side of things.
Just think of those moments where you have all this work's gone to a big go live, and someone says, "Oh, I'm not quite sure I like the colour of that photo," and it's like being able to articulate this, the effort that goes behind making something look quite simple is enormous. So we had a really great conversation. I think we share the same passion and respect for getting the boring things right, and really spending time and sort of space with those. For you, what when you think about sort of transformation as an activity that involves plans and people and process, what are the sort of foundational kind of approaches or aspects that you would ensure you would have in place?
I think it's really important to have a clear governance structure and clear sign-off process for the different aspects of the transformation work. And like you were saying, if no one should have the opportunity to say, "Oh, I don't like that," because they either should have been part of the sign-off process, or they should have been taken on the journey to understand that that's not their role, and that is someone else's role who has that as part of their remit. So for all design things, that would be the brand and marketing leads, for example. So those are the things I look for, and it's the governance side of things that is really important to make sure that you're hitting those milestones, and you've got the audit trail to say, okay, this was signed off on this date by these people. That's why we've progressed, and then this is when we're going live. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you can call it boring, but it is absolutely vital to make sure that the project stays on track. It doesn't creep. It doesn't get steered in different directions by interested parties.
Yeah. I mean, done well, governance should be an enabler of digital transformation and change. So I imagine in your role, you are both a sort of a decision maker and a recommender. So what does sort of good governance look like in action? If someone's asking for a decision to be accepted, what would you need in that instance?
So I think what was really important for the work that we had was we had a very good project manager, and that was part of the criteria for launching the transformation program, that we had a good project manager in place who was able to be the lead on that and to define who the senior stakeholders are who sign things off. And that gave me the freedom to then be the project sponsor, but also be someone who's feeding into the sign-off process as well, and be happy with certain aspects of it, and to steer it in certain directions that I thought were in line with the overall agreed vision for the project.
Yeah, agreed. I think often project management is perceived to be sort of an administrative aspect, and it's it's a very active role. You are the delegated person making that change happen on behalf of the sponsor.
That's right.
I think
They were really key in bringing along people who naturally would have concerns about taking a certain product that they've run for a number of years and feel very passionately ownership of it, and to assure them that we're not here to break it, we're not here to make it worse. The whole point is to improve it, and to have those rigorous plans for rollback if things don't work out. Those kind of things are really important, to provide that reassurance to stakeholders that it's not a one-way door, it is a two-way door in many digital projects. So those kind of reassurances help with people who maybe are resistant to change and don't want to initially go along with it. Those conversations are ones you take your time with. You reassure them. You maybe structure the program so that the more open to change teams, you do some early work with them, show early successes, and you can use those to then motivate the less or the more resistant teams to come along with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, good governance done well is at that decision-making point. There are no surprises. You've done the pre-landing of the pre-landing. We talk about it. It's really sort of passionate about that. And I think you had a really interesting point when we talked about when you're asked to make decisions, there's often so much information overload, and often that person might need to sort of over-justify, but someone said, just, can you make that paper shorter? Can you be more concise? Can you really think about what it is that you're asking of us?
Yeah, I think that's a really important skill, which I've had to learn over the years, is brevity, and rolling back the amount of information that's included in papers for boards or for project groups, to make sure that it contains purely the information they need in order to understand what's being asked of them, and to be clear about what you're asking them. Is it just for comment? Is it for approval, for sign off? So that's been really valuable for me to work with some leaders of outside the sector as well. So the boards at the Royal Academy of Engineering, most of the engineers come from industry, from commercial sector, and so learning how they work and what their expectations are in business really is helpful for the governance of charity work.
I mean, you can feel like you're the sort of in the eye of the storm. It can be kind of a sort of a spicy seat to sit in when you're leading change. And how do you sort of keep your kind of cool head and your helicopter view when you're sort of being pulled in many different directions?
I'm not so focused on hierarchy and the view that someone's opinion is of more value than others. There'll always be, obviously, senior stakeholders and people that you need to agree to your direction of travel, and you need to take them along the journey. But when you are working on a program or a project, I value the opinion of people who are the product owners. I value the people who are the product team, people who are what you would call more junior members. I think everyone has an opinion that is worth listening to, and I wouldn't consider myself to have a more important opinion than other people who are as involved, as passionate about the work that we're doing. So I hope that I am someone who listens to people, but then I've had to accept that ultimately I might have to make a decision, and it would be me who is the one that says this is the way to go. I've listened to everybody, and that's as true in recruitment as it is in project work. So that's the way I see things. I listen, and then I go with what I think is the best course of action.
Yeah.
You spoke a lot about kind of democracy and kind of seeking diverse inputs when you think about digital data and technology, and particularly in the Royal College of Anaesthetists at the moment, where you've got some real upcoming opportunities to bring people on a slightly different journey and start sort of bringing together that whole kind of physical member experience and that digital member experience. So I guess, like, what are your kind of hopes for that member centricity being lived and breathed within the organisation? How are you, in your role, going to sort of help kind of make that as impactful as possible?
So again, it's not that I'm having to persuade people to be member-centric and user-centric. It's one of the values or the strategic aims of the organisation to champion our membership and to really be the ones who are working towards making their world as easy as possible. So from a DDAT point of view, I've joined the RCOA, Royal College of Anaesthetists, at a really exciting time. So at the time of speaking, we've just announced last week that we've bought a new building, and we'll be moving to a new building over the next 12 months. And it's not just an office building, because we run events and we conduct exams for anaesthetists at the estate as well. So it's a real opportunity to not just lift what we do and drop it into another building. It's an opportunity to think about what technology we can introduce that makes things more seamless for the members and for the other people who are using the building. What are the opportunities to sort of unify the digital and the physical experience so that it feels to the people who visit the building and who visit the digital services that they are, in some sense, the same, that they are as intuitive as each other. When you go to access the building and log in, it's the same kind of thought process as logging into one of the services, and how we can integrate those with existing, maybe even federated logins that exist with the NHS and universities. So just trying to make things as straightforward as possible for the members is going to be, I think, the underlying theme of the strategy. But that is to be decided as well, because I'm not going to write the strategy myself in isolation. We're working over the next 12 months to develop that with trustees and council and members and staff, and making sure that people have the opportunity to feed into it. And so working in the open like that is, I think, the fundamental way to develop that buy-in and make sure people feel they are as part of the development of the strategy as the DDAT team.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating, because I think for me, when I listen to that, my mind kind of goes to, well, that's actually quite a big cultural change. You know, the way that we use a space, or the way that you use technology, or the way that conversations play out will shape the kind of culture of your organisation, and that's evolving. And that's not necessarily, I think, a space that people would automatically assume that your role would play an enormous influence in.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of struck by the fact that you've been on an integration sort of journey in an organisation. So what is your sort of experience and kind of reflections on sort of the importance of culture and how you sort of manage that evolving landscape?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. This is a cultural piece of work, really, and it will require really delicate bringing members and staff along with us on the journey for them to realise the opportunity as well. And it's as much for them, well, it is ultimately for them to benefit from. So it is the opportunity to really articulate what we want people to feel. And it's such an amazing opportunity. You know, I came from the sort of frontline digital side of things, web design, social media, digital marketing, and I've with intention moved myself into the data and technology side of things as well, because at some point I just realized that when you're in a digital team that's within a department, the digital team becomes that department. So I've been in digital teams that I've been in a comms department, and you become a comms digital team. If you're in a fundraising department, you become a fundraising digital team, or a services-led one if you're in a services team. And I've, in my view, having an objective standalone DDAT function enables you to fully serve the whole charity and not just one function over the others. And that's why I've intentionally gravitated towards roles and organisations that have aligned themselves to that kind of setup. And it was really exciting when I saw the RCOA role come up and saw that it was standalone and knew that there was going to be this opportunity to move to a new building. I thought this is once in a maybe career opportunity to really get things right in the new building.
Yeah. So we've spoken about this before around like someone with your experience having a seat at the table and kind of having that objective kind of technical, actually we're going to be member-led, we're data-led, we're audience-led, whatever it is. And so how are you finding having a seat at the table? You're part of the executive team, you're wearing multiple hats. Like how's that shift been for you in this new role?
It's been, again, really interesting, and I've got a very supportive manager in the chief exec at RCOA who's really allowed me to add my own kind of view to an existing ET, and they found it very refreshing, I think, has been some of the quotes, and you're never sure if that's a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it at face value. But I think it's understanding people and how they work, and what the best way to talk to them about what you're trying to achieve. With the RCOA, most of the trustees and council members are doctors, and they are very used to being, they are experts obviously in their field, but they're very used to making quick decisions and that decision to be the right course of action. And, I'm coming with my, let's do a survey and find out what users think and like bring everyone together. And it may be that's not moving things as quickly as some people might like it to be, and they can see what they think the solution is at the end. And they may well be right, and they could be right that that's ultimately what we will end up working on. But for me, buying in the people who are ultimately going to be either running the service or using the service are two fundamental aspects to the success. And so I don't want to skip those steps. So it's having those conversations with the governance teams to make sure that they understand there is value to doing the research, doing the discovery, taking stock of the situation and getting the foundations right before we skip to the kind of exciting new technologies that everyone's using.
Talking of new technology, so we had the conversation and you were like, I mean, we're not going to not talk about AI, but actually I guess me and Rebecca both felt like the conversation we had was quite refreshing. Like, actually, how can AI help people? How can it help people do their jobs better? How can it, solve problems? And so it'd be great to kind of, what are you sort of reflecting on, and how might that show up in the sort of digital data and technology journey for the RCOA?
Yeah, I completely recognise the opportunity for AI, and I really believe it is going to have a huge impact. But I'm pretty resistant to the assumption that you should just put an AI chatbot on your website, and that is the way that people want to engage with your content. If your data is showing that the content is not being accessed and not being absorbed, I would always do a content review and the infrastructure review before you even look at adding in a new technology into the mix. And for me, the opportunities are to improve efficiencies internally, if that's processing invoices and making enabling people to summarize information more quickly. Those are the kind of opportunities I think we should be using at the moment. I don't think, FOMO is not a strategy, to quote Rachel Caldicott. I think it's something that it's easy to see other organizations or the commercial sector using these things in a very public way. But I think the real shifts are going to come from internal use of AI to give people more time to actually think creatively and do the kind of less admin related parts of their jobs, and be able to dedicate their time to more higher level thinking.
Yeah. So talking to, part of my role as trustee at Blood Cancer UK. So we've been talking about kind of AI. They've been running some really exciting experiments, but again, some of it is tackling kind of internal problems. Some of it actually is being used in ideation. But we actually had a conversation yesterday about health information. And, if you think, I love your story of kind of starting you've done significant work in a health charity, sort of gone through the membership route, and now you've come kind of full circle, Royal College, membership, health. And so I wondered what the sort of considerations were around sort of health information, like how you make sure that you sort of protect the integrity of that vital information when you've got things like AI sort of coming into the mix and potentially disrupting it, and maybe not for the right outcome.
Yeah, it's a worry, and it's a live conversation, not only for our own content, but also patients potentially not realizing that they are accessing AI generated content through search engines or through the Gen AI tools. So it's about what our policy is and what our guidelines are to make sure that our content is as we're never publishing anything that a Gen AI platform has generated without a human input, firstly. But it's also part of the technology work will be making sure that our platforms, the metadata sits behind it to make sure that the people the platforms understand that we are a trusted source of information, and that gets elevated in the results, because that's ultimately, it's a new form of search engine optimization, and we've got to realize that people are going to be using these tools, and it's how we ensure that our information becomes part of that trusted source of information. And at the same time, we need more strategies for bringing people directly to our content rather than relying on those tools as well.
Do you feel the pressure in your role to sort of own the answers to those questions within the executive leadership team, the council, the trustees?
I don't feel the pressure to own them, but I feel it's my role to make sure that everyone has the right information and is steered in the direction to understand what it is that they have to make a decision about, so that it's not necessarily always going to be ultimately my decision. We've got a president and chief exec who have those powers, but it's my role to make sure that I speak up and make sure that the information is shared and don't allow groupthink to sway the conversation in a certain way. So I've had to, it's not my natural inclination sometimes to jump in and say, hang on a second, I think we need to think about these other things. So I've had to learn to do that as part of my role as an exec member. So that's where I feel like my current development challenges is being that kind of more forthright member of the team who's not just listening, and because I am a reflector. So if people are saying things and I broadly think they're okay and they're correct, I'll probably just sit there and not interject. Whereas I'm learning that backing up someone who's saying something by reiterating the point is a helpful contribution to that, and it helps people who are maybe not quite clear about what the situation is, helps them get more of a picture of what's going on as well.
Definitely. And in my role as a trustee, I spend a lot of time with the sort of exec director of kind of engagement and comms, where we'll kind of walk through kind of papers or what we need to present. And then what I'm generally then doing in the board is then providing backup case studies to say, actually, this is really kind of best practice in the sector. Here's some examples of other organisations. And again, just sort of understanding, when you sort of move in different leadership kind of, I guess, routes and kind of roles that you play, that actually it sort of changes you're listening, but actually the power of kind of validation or rationales is really, really important in those leadership roles when you start moving into kind of much more kind of decision making, leading an organization, not just your area.
I don't know if my sense is correct or not, but it sort of felt like you might have had a slight sort of baptism of fire into sort of leadership, or that's certainly my read from your story. And I wondered what your sort of sense is of what do you feel is changing around the sort of demands being placed on you as a leader or leaders that you witness in the organisation, and how do you sort of manage the vastness of your world and what's out there? You know, like what's your approach to making sure that you're focused on the right thing at the right time?
I take a lot of steer, and maybe they're not even aware of it, from observing my colleagues and listening to team members. And like I said earlier, that doesn't necessarily have to be my peers across the organisation, and also spend a lot of time listening to people from other organisations, other trustees or other SLT members who, you know, one of the great things that's happened in recent years is people are publishing their week notes and their month notes, and I'm a great reader of those. I may start doing it at some point, but at the moment, despite my early blogging days, I'm not someone who sits down and writes what I've learned this week. But I see the value of it, so I am gravitating towards it slowly. But I benefit a lot from people. I have regular catch-ups with various different connections across the sector to learn from them and use those to help steer me in the right direction and get that wider sense than just what I'm seeing immediately around the table at executive or trustee meetings, so that we can learn from others who are doing similar things.
Do you have a sense, I'm sort of minded of the story that you told about your PhD professor, and, you know, that you saw something in him that you wanted to emulate in your career and the way you conducted yourself. Do you have a sort of a structured learning approach to the gaps that you feel like I want to develop further in this, or are you just sort of open to people and sort of stimulus as it shows up?
I'm much more kind of organic and just open to just learning. I like learning new things, and I like teaching myself things that I don't know about. And so I've kind of developed this approach where I'll learn enough to feel like I understand this, and then I'll just move on to something else. I never feel like I need to be a complete expert in something in order to have enough, because I've got team members and I've got colleagues who are the experts in it. So I get enough of an understanding to be able to make a decision. But ultimately, if I'm not confident, I'll always lean on the people who have that side of things. So I think that's come from my, like we were talking about, generalist kind of background. I've, in early my digital career, did the different roles, and now, having reached the DDAT director level, I don't have direct experience of everyone that is in my teams, and that's something I've had to become more comfortable with, and something that I've had to accept that I'll never know. In some cases, I'll never know anything about what they do. So I need to get more comfortable with that and get to a point where I'm not learning everything about everything anymore, and I'm just developing teams that I trust and can rely on to do what the ultimate their role is, and how that supports the organisation.
And how are you creating the conditions for that? And I totally empathise with not knowing everything as someone who isn't from a technical background, you know, kind of working with Rebecca and the leadership team, leading a digital technology agency, but actually sort of getting comfortable with leading through others, and actually their successes, their outcomes are, that's what I sort of get motivation from. So like, are there sort of things you're really cognizant of, other than sort of inviting voices, that create the conditions for your teams to really thrive and you know, achieve their potential?
I think it's generally, my approach is to be approachable and to be as interested in people and what they've been up to at the weekend. And we're at the RCOA, we have a really nice culture that existed before I joined, and it was a really nice thing to be welcomed into. We have daily stand-ups with the tech teams, and we talk about work and personal, there's an overlap and it's not delineated. And some of those, they're fully about, the weekend cake making extravaganza. And sometimes they're all about this particular thorny problem. And it's a really supportive environment that I'm trying to foster, that we have experts in every aspect of their roles, but everyone's supportive of each other, and they try and, because it's small enough that they understand each other's roles. And that's the kind of thing that I need to make sure is leveraged when we are doing the building move, that we're not just bringing in a third-party company to handle the move, and this expertise that we've had for years and years at the college is missed, and they feel sidelines. That's something I'm quite passionate about, making sure that we bring along the expertise that we have within the organisation. So that's my ultimate message every time we talk about this at the senior level, is we need to make sure that the teams that we have feel invested and feel involved. Otherwise, it'll be something that's done to them and not with them.
Yeah.
And that will carry through the digital strategy as well.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned about like learning and kind of knowing when to stop, but there is that sort of underlying like curiosity that lies within you. And we got onto the subject of curiosity off the back of you winning a BEMA 100. So you recognised in 2023 as, well, bravest client category, but, amongst many leaders. And as part of that, you were asked to submit kind of something you find innovative. And your submission referenced bread gloves, which was unexpected for many people, but it actually came from your mindset of curiosity and innovation.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up.
No problem.
So firstly, I hadn't clocked that that was going to be published on their public website. I thought it was just for the ceremony or something. So yeah, the question was, what innovations do you are you most inspired by? And it's no secret that bread is the greatest foodstuff known to man. Yeah, that is a fact, undisputed. And at some point, I can't even remember when, my wife had sent me this thing, which I guess is a mock-up, but I really want to believe is a true product, which are bread gloves. And it's a graphic of a person with gloves that are made of bread, and the tagline is like, turn any food into a sandwich. And I thought that is an incredible innovation. And so rather than talk about, Marconi or Tim Berners-Lee or any of the things that I thought people would put under their favorite innovation, I would put that because, I think it's important sometimes it's always important to maintain a sense of humor. It's important to not take yourself at all seriously. I think you've got to have that. Otherwise, you'll just kind of get bogged down in things. And that's been my approach throughout my career is, look for those moments of brevity, because otherwise you'll just get too bogged down.
Definitely. And I think if we sort of go right back to the start of the conversation, when we think about change and transformation, like it's not smooth sailing, and, to have that psychological safety and find joy, humour is just as important as kind of, moving through stuff. And, we talk openly, David, about, we had some really tough conversations through that project because you're working through some gnarly stuff that no one's been through before, but we always remained united on the outcome, like what is best for the organisation, how we're going to make sure we do that, and how do we create the space for our teams to thrive. And I think that's really important. I guess the fact that you hold on to humour, like that's, I love spending time with you. In terms of like sort of the sector and leaders, when we think about the future, like hope, what are your hopes for people working in the sector and leaders, and, what the future might bring?
I hope that people continue to realise that getting the foundations right is so important, and that you need to have that courage to just draw a line under things and say, we can't just keep building on top of building on top of building. We need to take stock every now and then to make sure that we don't need to fundamentally shift what we've been working on. So I would hope that is something that continues to happen. I also think there's been a real shift recently, or a recognition that foundational, fundamental digital skills in the UK are lacking, and that's across the nation, not within the charity sector. And there are drives to reduce the gap there, which I'm very passionate about, and I'm working with Future.now, who are leading that kind of charge across the country to reduce the gap. And we formed a nascent partnership with the NHS's Digital Academy to address the gap in the workforce at a curriculum level, at a current workforce level, to try and reduce that over the next generations. And that's something we're doing internally as well at the college, and we did at Royal Academy of Engineering as well. So I really think those two things, and they're both essentially about foundations. I think there's a tendency to run before you can walk with digital, and you really need to have that person saying, shall we get the first bits right before we move on to the shiny, exciting things?
Yeah. And definitely sort of it's a conversation that's very live for a lot of organisations we're working with, is around the digital divide. And actually we talk about transformation, but we're not always talking about like the sort of digital exclusions that exist, particularly when you think about services being provided, how they're being accessed. So, really kind of making sure that when we're transforming, what we're not doing is excluding audiences who might need our help or who might want to engage with us. So definitely kind of at Manifesto, we're really passionate about kind of how the transformation is transformative for everyone, not just kind of, particular audiences.
Yeah, you've got to be really strong on ensuring accessibility is built in from the start. And that's something, I've talked about a lot when we were working on the Breast Cancer Now transformation, that you can't just tack it on at the end. It has to be, and it benefits everybody. If you build these new platforms with accessibility baked in from the start, everybody benefits from that. It's usability, it's intuitive, it helps everyone. So I'll always ensure that those are things that are baked into the brief.
100%. And I think particularly if you, with that program of work, we're talking about people on their journey with breast cancer and sort of the cognitive load, or how they might be using devices when they're using them, and therefore that experience sort of needs to be empathetic to where they are in their sort of psychological journey, not just is this information in this place and it's intuitive, yes of course, but the sort of accessibility and usability of that has, was that one of the key sort of experience principles that sort of program was built on. Exactly.
And the same runs true for RCOA. We've got tools that clinicians are using to make decisions, and they need to be intuitive and accessible in the accessibility meaning, but also in the easy to find, easy to use, and for patient information as well. So we serve multiple audiences. So it's about how we personalize the experience for each type of audience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they might need to access that information in the middle of an operating room or something. It's such a vast area, and I think people are so narrow in their thinking of it. But yeah, I know you've got very interesting insight, because we've talked about it before. I guess so what next for you? We talked about your move, and the Royal College of Anaesthetists, which is easier to say than it is to spell, I have to say.
So the two big things really over the next 12 months, and they're running in tandem and they're interlinked, are the estates move. So not literally just moving from one building to another and replicating, but what's the opportunity there? And at the same time, developing our overarching digital data and technology strategy for the college, which is about the internal and the external, how we support the profession to adopt better ways of working using digital. So that's enough for me, to be quite honest. Those are the two big things. So I'm already getting stuck in, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we work together on that.
Brilliant. And our final question, we're sort of compiling a compendium of sort of on the ground leadership reflection and insight. Is there anything that you would specifically want to leave here in this conversation for a current or future leader that has really helped you in your career?
I think, well, for me personally, it's been the not being fixated on going on a particular journey in a particular direction and just seeing where things take me. It's only really in recent years I've had a particular kind of direction of travel, and like I say, wanting to move into that DDAT sector rather than just being focused on frontline digital services. So I think for me, it's about listening to people that I respect, and that is where I've found the most success, is gravitating towards people that I find interesting. They don't have to be in the same field of work or even the same part of their lives, but people who I find interesting have an influence on me. And I've always found that various different mentors throughout my life haven't been official mentors, but they're people that I've respected. So Will, my PhD supervisor, and Jeremy and Paul, who are my subsequent supervisors, I'm still in touch, and I really respect them. And then various different people I've encountered throughout my working life here as well.
Yeah, it's another lens to sort of networks, really, and networking, isn't it? People, you don't have to go to a noisy hotel conference room and speak to people you don't know. You can just sort of quietly look out for people who inspire you, and follow them.
I would say some people who've had the most significant influence on me are people I've never even met. I've just read their writing online, and they've influenced me and the way that I work or the way that I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.